I don't even know why anybody is pretending to be calm right now, because this situation is not calm, it is not normal, and it is not slowing down. This is one of those moments where you can feel the walls closing in, and everybody who thought they were safe inside the room is now realizing the room might be wired, recorded, duplicated, and archived. This is not a rumor wave. This is not social media noise. This is a legal nightmare unfolding in real time, and everybody connected to Diddy knows it. Because let's be honest, if you were confident, you wouldn't be quiet. If you were clean, you wouldn't be nervous. And if you had nothing to hide, you would not be bracing for another Netflix shocker like it's a hurricane coming straight at your house. The silence coming out of Diddy's legal camp right now is loud, heavy, and intentional. And silence at this stage does not mean strategy. It means fear. Everybody keeps asking why this feels different. I'll tell you why. Because the timeline finally lined up, and once the timeline locks, the excuses collapse. People brushed past Anthony Rico's exit in 2024 like it was nothing, like it was just another lawyer switching clients, like it didn't matter. But now that people are actually paying attention, that exit looks less like coincidence and more like a warning flare that everybody ignored. Ricco did not leave late. He did not leave when it got embarrassing. He did not leave when the cameras showed up. He left when the case was still being publicly framed as manageable. That's the part that should scare everybody. When a seasoned federal defense attorney walks away before the storm, that means he already saw the clouds forming while everybody else was still smiling for photos. And let me be very clear, because people keep trying to soften this. Ricco didn't say he was tired. He didn't say he was overwhelmed. He didn't say he had scheduling conflicts. He said he could not continue representation without violating professional standards. That is lawyer code for this situation is about to contaminate me. That is not emotion. That is survival instinct. Now fast forward to what the public finally got hit with. The revelation that Diddy secretly recorded legal conversations, not business conversations, not casual conversations, legal conversations, strategy conversations, conversations that are supposed to be protected by privilege. That right there is when this whole thing crossed into dangerous territory. Because once a client records his own lawyers without consent, everything changes. Privilege gets shaky, trust gets shattered, and suddenly, attorneys are no longer just defenders, they are potential evidence. That's why Mark Agnifilo wasn't just annoyed, he was furious. Furious is not the reaction of someone inconvenienced. Furious is the reaction of someone realizing their professional life might be sitting on a hard drive they don't control. And then comes the number that makes everybody's stomach drop. 140 hours. Not 10, not 20, 140. That is not accidental footage. That is not a freelance mistake. That is documentation. That is accumulation. That is someone pressing record over and over again in spaces where nobody thought they were being watched. Now let's talk math, because math does not lie. 3 days of filming does not equal 140 hours. That means the recording started earlier, lasted longer, or involved multiple people and multiple contexts. That means strategy meetings. That means private discussions. That means moments when lawyers speak freely, debate risks, vent frustrations, or float ideas that are never meant to exist outside the room. And this is why Diddy's legal team is bracing, not preparing, not responding, bracing, because they don't know what version of themselves exists on those tapes. They don't know what was captured, how it was framed, or how it might be edited. They don't know who has access, how many copies exist, or whether prosecutors already have their hands on portions of it. That uncertainty is torture in the legal world. Because here's what people outside the system don't understand. It does not take a confession to end a lawyer's career. It takes implication, it takes tone. It takes context stripped of explanation, a joke taken seriously, a hypothetical taken literally, a moment of frustration framed as intent. And once that happens, no press release can fix it. This is why Anthony Rico's exit now looks genius instead of confusing. He didn't wait to see how bad it got. He didn't gamble on loyalty. He didn't assume protection. He read the room and realized the room might be recorded. So he left. Meanwhile, others stayed. Mark Agnifilo, Brian Steele, Nicole Westmoreland. Xavier Donaldson. All brilliant attorneys in their own right, but brilliance does not protect you from exposure. And now, instead of controlling the narrative, they're reacting to it. Instead of commanding the pace, they're watching documentaries roll out piece by piece, wondering what footage might surface next. And let's talk about Netflix, because Netflix is not in the business of protecting reputations. Netflix is in the business of storytelling, and the most dangerous stories are the ones already half told. Another Netflix shocker doesn't mean a new allegation. It means new context. It means unseen footage. It means conversations the public was never supposed to hear. Add 50 Cent to the mix, and now you're dealing with someone who doesn't leak to warn, he leaks to embarrass. He doesn't tease for clout, he teases to destabilize. When he says he has material, history says he's not bluffing. And if he's sitting on footage that overlaps with what Netflix has, that creates a pressure cooker nobody can control. This is no longer about Diddy defending himself. This is about everyone around him defending their licenses, their legacies, and their futures. Because if even 5 minutes of those 140 hours crosses an ethical line, careers end. Not hypothetically, immediately. Witness discussions, jury speculation, strategy that borders misconduct. Even internal disagreements can be weaponized. And once lawyers become witnesses, the entire defense collapses inward. You cannot argue your way out of a recording. That's why the energy has shifted. That's why statements stopped. That's why the confidence disappeared. That's why everybody is suddenly careful with words. Because the danger is no longer theoretical. It's archived. People laughed when Ricco left. They downplayed him. They tried to make him look emotional. Now that same exit looks like the smartest move anyone made in this entire saga. He didn't abandon ship. He recognized it was already taking on water. And now everybody else is standing there, asking themselves the same question too late. What was said when nobody thought they were being recorded? That's the real story. That's why this is heating up instead of cooling down. And that's why another Netflix shocker is not just possible, it's expected. Because secrets don't disappear. They surface. And when they do, they don't just take down the person who recorded them. They take down everyone who spoke freely, believing they were protected. That's where we are. And until someone explains how 3 days became 140 hours, nobody involved is sleeping comfortably. Y'all already know this ain't over. At this stage, the Diddy case has crossed a line where speculation stops being entertainment and starts becoming a matter of legal survival for everyone involved. The public keeps reacting to moments, but moments don't explain systems, and systems are exactly what this case is about. What matters now is not the latest headline, but the sequence of decisions that quietly took place long before cameras turned on. When people talk about the story changing, they're not talking about emotion. They're talking about exposure. Because once secret recordings entered the conversation, this stopped being a celebrity downfall and became a legal containment problem. Not just for Diddy, but for anyone who ever believed they were protected by privilege while advising him. The most important name in this entire timeline is not Mark Agnifilo, not Brian Steele, not Nicole Westmoreland, not Xavier Donaldson. It's Anthony Rico. And the reason it's Anthony Rico is because he exited before chaos forced him out. He left when silence still existed. That distinction matters more than anything else. Anthony Rico was not new to federal defense. He was not inexperienced. He was not unfamiliar with pressure, controversy, or public scrutiny. This is a man who defended high-risk defendants in the Southern District of New York for decades. When someone like that walks away from a client at the peak of a case, money is not the reason. Access is not the reason. Ego is not the reason. The only reason that outweighs all of those is risk. When Ricco filed his withdrawal in April 2024 and stated that he could not continue representation without violating professional standards, that was not lawyer language meant to soften a departure. That was a boundary being documented. That was a man putting distance between himself and a situation he believed would eventually collapse inward. And the fact that most people ignored it doesn't make it less important. It makes it more important. Fast forward to what the public learned later. Reports emerged that Diddy secretly recorded legal conversations with his own attorney. That detail alone detonates the foundation of any defense. Attorney-client privilege is not symbolic. It is functional. Once it's compromised, the entire legal structure becomes unstable, and when the compromise comes from the client himself, that instability becomes uncontrollable. This is why the reaction from Mark Agnifilo was described as fury, not disappointment, not surprise, fury. Because a client recording legal counsel without consent doesn't just violate trust. It creates the possibility that private legal strategy, ethical debates, internal disagreements, and emotional reactions are no longer private. It exposes the people who are supposed to protect you. That brings us to the number that refuses to make sense, 140 hours. That number does not align with the explanation being offered publicly. 3 days of filming does not produce 140 hours of usable footage. That discrepancy tells you something important. It tells you this recording process was not incidental. It was sustained, it was deliberate. And it likely involved more than one context. Once you accept that, the question stops being whether Diddy recorded his lawyer and becomes who else was recorded, how often, and under what circumstances. Strategy meetings, crisis discussions, conversations about witnesses, conversations about public narratives, conversations about risk, conversations people believed were protected. This is where the danger shifts from theoretical to real. Legal professionals know exactly what kinds of conversations cannot exist on record. Discussions about influencing witnesses, even indirectly, are career-ending. Conversations about jury selection manipulation, even jokingly, cross ethical lines. Strategy discussions that drift into concealment or misrepresentation are not protected by privilege. They are evidence. And here's the part that people keep missing. It doesn't take a smoking gun. It doesn't take a confession. It takes tone, implication, suggestion. A single moment where a lawyer appears to entertain misconduct, even hypothetically, can dismantle a career built over decades. That is why Anthony Rico's exit now looks less like abandonment and more like foresight. He didn't leave because the case was hard. He left because the rules were being bent in ways that could not be undone. And when you place his departure next to what we now know about recording behavior, the timeline stops looking random. After Ricco left, the defense team changed shape. New energy, new confidence, new posture. But confidence does not erase exposure. And now, with reports that extensive recordings exist, those same attorneys are left with a problem they cannot solve through argument alone. They don't know what was captured. They don't know who has it. They don't know how many copies exist. And they don't know whether prosecutors already possess portions of it. Uncertainty at this level is paralyzing because it means every sentence spoken in private is now a potential liability. Every strategic disagreement could be reframed as doubt. Every emotional reaction could be framed as awareness. Every offhand remark could be isolated and weaponized. This is why silence has replaced bravado. This is why statements have stopped. This is why the tone has shifted. Because legal confidence only exists when you control the facts. And right now, control is questionable. What makes this even more striking is how aggressively Anthony Rico was minimized after his exit. He was painted as emotional, as frustrated, as wanting access. That narrative only works if people don't understand the legal world. Experienced attorneys do not leave cases because they feel excluded. They leave when they see liability forming around them. Now that liability is visible. 140 hours is not documentation. It is exposure. And exposure doesn't just affect the person being recorded. It affects everyone in the room. That is why this case is no longer contained to Diddy alone. Because once attorneys become potential witnesses, the entire defense structure changes. This is also why comparisons to past scandals fall short. This is not about public opinion. This is about professional survival. Lawyers are trained to anticipate risk. And right now, the risk is not hypothetical. The recordings themselves may not even need to be introduced in full. The threat of their existence is enough. Enough to force withdrawals. Enough to force silence. Enough to force strategic retreats. Enough to shift the balance of power in a case that already involves allegations of obstruction and influence. Anthony Rico recognized that early. Others may now be realizing it late, and that's why this story is still moving. Not because of gossip, not because of leaks, but because systems don't fail quietly. They crack first, then they collapse. And we are watching the cracks widen in real time. The unanswered questions are now the loudest part of this case. Why the recordings were made, how long they were made, who was aware, who wasn't, who left early, who stayed, and who may ultimately be pulled into the legal gravity of someone else's decisions. This is no longer about defending a client. It's about distancing yourself from evidence you may not even know exists. That's the reality. And until someone explains how 3 days became 140 hours, this case isn't cooling down. It's heating up. I'm gonna say this straight because I don't have time to dress it up. Diddy finally played with the wrong people. And this time, there is no spinning it, no charming it, no bullying it away. The streets are not buzzing because of rumors. They're buzzing because the power dynamics just flipped. And Netflix is no longer pretending to be polite about it. This is not Diddy versus bloggers. This is not Diddy versus the internet. This is a corporation with infinite money, unlimited legal muscle, and zero emotional attachment to him, deciding they are done being accused, done being threatened, and done letting him rewrite reality in public. And when a company like Netflix gets tired, they don't argue. They document, they file, and they crush. Here's what people are missing. Netflix is not reacting emotionally. Netflix is reacting strategically. Because while Diddy keeps going online telling people the footage was stolen, Netflix has already sent his legal team paperwork proving exactly how they obtained it. Chain of custody, licensing records, consent documentation, legal transfer trails, everything buttoned up, stamped, and boring in the way that destroys lawsuits. And yet Diddy keeps talking. That's the problem. Because when you keep accusing a corporation of theft, conspiracy, and criminal behavior after they've already proven legal acquisition, you are no longer defending yourself. You are provoking a counterstrike. And corporations don't play about their reputation. They especially don't play when someone with shrinking leverage keeps dragging their name through headlines. This is where the streets are saying Netflix is getting ready to fire back, not with press statements, but with court filings. And if that happens, Diddy won't be the one asking for $1 billion anymore. He'll be the one explaining why he lied. Now let's talk about the part that really ended him. Because it wasn't Netflix, it wasn't the courts, it was his own cameraman. And before anybody jumps, listen carefully. Because this is not about betrayal, this is about paperwork. Or more accurately, the lack of it. The man who filmed Diddy for over 2 years finally broke his silence, and in doing so, detonated Diddy's entire legal strategy without even trying. His statement did 3 devastating things, and people don't even realize it yet. First, he made it clear he did not leak the footage. That matters because it removes intent and malice from his side completely. Second, he pointed directly at a freelancer who filled in for 3 days while he was out of state. Only 3 days. Third, and this is the nuclear part, he said plainly that this was not a contract issue. Let me translate that in grown man language. When someone says it was not a contract issue, that means there was no contract, no ownership agreement, no work for hire clause, no copyright assignment, no NDAs, no releases, nothing. And that single fact collapses Diddy's entire billion-dollar bluff. Because if there was no contract, Diddy never owned the footage. And if he never owned it, it could not be stolen from him. That's not opinion. That's law. This is where Diddy's long-standing business habits finally caught up with him. For decades, he has avoided contracts with creatives. Not accidentally. Intentionally. Because contracts limit control. Contracts define ownership. Contracts protect workers. And Diddy's model has always been about flexibility for him, not security for them. We've heard this pattern before. Artists, producers, assistants, dancers, writers. Little Rod said it in court. Worked years without a contract, promised payment, negotiated down, never fully paid. That's not random behavior. That's a system. And systems eventually collapse under their own weight. So when this cameraman says there was no contract, he's not confessing to wrongdoing. He's explaining why the footage walked out the door legally. Because without a contract, the freelancer who handled that footage was free to license it, free to sell it, free to transfer rights. And once Netflix purchased it legally, the game was over. Netflix didn't steal anything. Netflix bought something Diddy never owned. That's why his legal threats are falling flat. That's why cease and desist letters didn't scare anyone. That's why Netflix is allegedly telling his lawyers to get him under control. Because every time Diddy goes online and claims theft, he's building a defamation case against himself. And make no mistake, a billion-dollar lawsuit can go both ways. Netflix can flip this entirely. They can ask a court to officially declare ownership of the footage. They can sue for defamation for false public claims. They can sue for interference with business. They can recover legal fees. They can bury him in discovery. And discovery is the last thing Diddy wants. Because discovery doesn't just ask about one video. Discovery opens hard drives. Discovery opens archives. Discovery opens years of footage he filmed, thinking nobody would ever see it. Discovery turns his own documentation into evidence. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. If Diddy files anything frivolous, Netflix will not settle. They will counterpunch. And when corporations counterpunch, they aim to end the fight permanently. Now let's address the elephant, because people are side-eyeing the cameraman too. People are asking how convenient it is that he just happened to be out of state for the exact 3 days the most damaging footage walked away. Is that coincidence? Maybe. Is it suspicious? Absolutely. But here's the thing. Even if it was intentional, it was still legal. And legality beats loyalty every time in court. If that cameraman wanted distance from a sinking ship, the smartest move was leaving no contract behind. And whether that was rebellion, self-protection, or quiet resignation, it worked. Because now he's clean, Netflix is protected, and Diddy is screaming into a void. Now layer 50 Cent on top of this. Because 50 doesn't bluff, he doesn't tease, he doesn't warn. When he says he has footage, history says he has footage. And when he aligns with a Netflix rollout, that's not coincidence. That's coordination. People are asking whether footage made its way to prosecutors before Diddy's arrest. Nobody knows. But what people do know is the timing is ugly. And ugly timing is never accidental. So no, Netflix didn't rob Diddy. The cameraman didn't betray him. The freelancer didn't commit a crime. 50 didn't manipulate the system. Diddy beat himself. He refused contracts, he refused boundaries, he refused to adapt. And now he's accusing a global corporation of crimes they already proved they didn't commit. Netflix is not afraid of Diddy. Netflix is irritated by him. And irritation turns into lawsuits real fast when billions are involved. The streets aren't saying Netflix is coming for Diddy's coins because they hate him. They're saying it because he won't shut up. And when someone with declining power keeps poking an entity with unlimited power, the ending is predictable. That documentary isn't the end. It's the opening credits. And if Diddy doesn't stop playing public chess with private paperwork, Netflix won't just roll the next episode. They'll roll him.